Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can talk about the mental health and personality characteristics of the Mandalorian, right? So this is from the TV show. The character is also known as Din Djarin. Now, the Mandalorian TV series is on Disney+, and if I'm not mistaken, it's now the #1 streaming show, beating out Stranger Things, which is on Netflix. I've had a number of requests for this video. This review is based on chapters 1 through 4, so I'll issue a spoiler alert for those chapters. Now, I learned something about them in chapter 1, and a little bit more in 2, and 3, and 4. So it becomes kind of tricky to decide when to make the video. When do I have enough information to assess his personality? So after seeing chapter 4, I thought, okay, I think I have enough. But of course, as I make this, when chapters 5 through 8 come out, I'm sure there'll be a lot more that comes out about his personality in those. Now, in the world of Star Wars, you have these movies, right? The popular movies that many people have seen. And even those who have not seen them are aware that they exist. At the time I'm making this video, there are 8 of those movies, 8 episodes, with the 9th one coming out in just a few weeks. Of course, episodes 4 through 6 came out first, then we see 1, 2, and 3, and then 7 and 8, and we'll see 9 soon, like I said. Then we also have Star Wars movies like Rogue One and Solo. And of course, you have all kinds of other works, which are referred to as the Star Wars Expanded Universe. Now, I'm reasonably familiar with the movies. I've seen all of them multiple times, probably too many times. I saw the original Star Wars in 1978 when I was 6 years old, a year after it was released. This was before it was called Episode 4, A New Hope. Back then it was just Star Wars. Even still, I understand there's a lot more to know when looking at the expanded universe. For example, backstories of different characters, and all these other plots that we don't see talked about in the movies. Strictly speaking, we don't hear the word Mandalorian in any of the movies, and no reference to Din Djarin either. So I'll have to use some of the material from the expanded universe to build out the backstory. But I tried to rely on just the series for the personality profile. We see in The Empire Strikes Back this character, Boba Fett. We see him again in Return of the Jedi. He's a cool-looking character, his armor, his assortment of weapons, but he really doesn't do a lot in these 2 movies. Moving to the prequel movies, we see Jango Fett, Boba Fett's father. He's a lot more active, appears to be a much more capable combatant based on what we can see in those movies, but this is really true with several characters we see in the prequel movies. They just seem a lot more energetic and enthusiastic. So in the series The Mandalorian starts out, we see that the Mandalorian is wearing armor that is quite similar to that of Jango Fett and Boba Fett. And like those 2, he's essentially a bounty hunter and a mercenary. Now in the movies, Jango Fett and Boba Fett were both clearly bad guys, but the Mandalorian appears to be a bit different from them, perhaps a bit more complicated. Now, it's important to understand that although we see all these different write-ups and videos about the TV show referring to a Mandalorian race, the Mandalorians that we're talking about in this TV series are not part of a Mandalorian race, but rather they are part of a Mandalorian culture. We know, for example, that Din Djarin was taken by the Mandalorians and raised by them after his parents were killed. So he adopted their culture and their religion. Like in any culture, there are norms, there are expectations that the Mandalorians are supposed to follow, including being an honorable warrior. So it's clear that Jango Fett and Boba Fett really didn't adhere to the cultural elements of being a Mandalorian. So with Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, we have a kind of dichotomy. A bounty hunter who regularly assaults and murders individuals, and a person who at the same time seems to follow a code of ethics, right? So we have kind of a strange combination here. And this kind of makes for an interesting personality profile. It's worth noting that the Mandalorian travels with a creature who I will refer to as Baby Yoda. I realize that it's not Yoda, but at this time we don't have the character's name, so it's just easier for everyone to call him Baby Yoda. In terms of mental health, I really don't see that the Mandalorian meets the criteria for any mental disorders. He does have a trauma history, a fairly severe one at that, losing his entire family when he was young. This is fairly common for this type of hero. When you look at many of these warrior heroes, you often see a history of traumatic loss. As I was contemplating the personality characteristics of the Mandalorian, it occurred to me that he has a lot in common with other self-reliant, wandering type heroes that we see in the movies and on television. For example, if we look at Batman, we see a similar origin story in the sense of losing his parents. Both seem to have a dark side. Batman has the armored suit, the utility belt, and uses violence to solve problems. Has that in common with the Mandalorian, and they both tend to be loners. He also reminds me of Bruce Banner, as we see him in the 1978 to 1982 series, The Incredible Hulk. So Bruce Banner was played by Bill Bixby, and The Incredible Hulk was played by Lou Ferrigno. So we see that Bruce Banner also had a traumatic origin story. He lost his wife in a car accident. We see that he travels from place to place solving problems with aggression, although the Hulk really takes care of the aggression part. So there's a few things in common here with Bruce Banner. He also seems a bit like many of Clint Eastwood's characters, really in any number of westerns, but Pale Rider specifically came to mind. We see it has some similarities to James Bond. Women are attracted to him wherever he goes. He's a man of mystery. James Bond also likes unusual weapons. He shares some characteristics with Iron Man, the metal suit, weapons on his wrists, ability to scan using his helmet. We see kind of the same thing with the Predator. Again, weapons on the wrists, ability to scan, and of course the Predator hunted down adversaries and had a system of honor when he did that. And the last item here that he kind of matches up with is not actually a movie or a TV show, but a car, the DeLorean, made from 1981 to 1983. Obviously, there's a similarity with the name, right? DeLorean and Mandalorian. But the DeLorean also had a stainless steel body, like stainless steel body panels. Looks a lot like Beskar, the Mandalorian iron that the Mandalorian suit is made out of. We see that the DeLorean is also unusual, and when one's around, people are surprised and curious when they see it. So there seems to be a connection there. Also, I can't help but think that if the Mandalorian was not a Star Wars character and he was a Transformer, he would transform into a DeLorean. I think that just makes sense. Now, as far as personality, let's take a look at the personality profile based on the 5-factor model. I remember the 5 factors through the acronym OCEAN: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. So starting with openness to experience, I would guess that overall, the Mandalorian is low in openness. If we look at the facet level, we see he tends to have low fantasy. He doesn't seem to daydream much. Low aesthetics. He tends to be realistic. In terms of feelings, he might be more mid-range here. He's withdrawn, not affectionate, but there is this sense that he could be introspective. So again, maybe more in the middle on feelings. In terms of actions, even though he may seem adventurous, he's really not optimistic or talkative, so I would put him in the mid-range here as well. And in terms of values, I would definitely put him at a low score for values because he is conservative and cautious. Now moving to conscientiousness, I would say this one's pretty clear. He appears to be highly conscientious. He has high scores across every facet on this trait. We see competence. He's effective and versatile. In terms of order, he's organized and accurate. In terms of dutifulness, he's scrupulous. He's achievement striving, so ambitious, tenacious, and diligent. He has high self-discipline. He's serious, and he follows the job through to the end. And of course, high deliberation. He's both thoughtful and careful. Moving to extraversion, here I think he's somewhere in the middle on extraversion. If we look at the facets, we know that he tends to be distant and withdrawn, so he's going to be low on both warmth and gregariousness. Now with assertiveness and activity, he's high, I think, because he's aggressive, confident, and active. With excitement seeking, it might seem like he's high based on his line of work, but when somebody's high on this facet, they tend to like bright lights and a lot of noise, a lot of people around, a lot of stimulation. He tends to be more on the low side because I view him as more withdrawn and controlled. With the last facet, positive emotions, he doesn't appear to be too cheerful, so I would put him kind of on the low side for this one. Moving to agreeableness, I think overall for agreeableness he tends to be mid-range. Looking at the facets, starting with trust, we see he tends to have a low level of trust. He tends to be suspicious and cautious, assuming that others may be dangerous. With straightforwardness, I would say he's high. He seems to be sincere and direct. What we see with straightforwardness is that if somebody's low in this particular facet, they believe they have to deceive people or leave out facts when they recall a narrative. So they don't really trust people. In a sense, it's kind of similar to trust in this way. They don't trust people to just hear and process the truth, the sincere accounting of something. They have to modify it a bit, essentially for their own safety. But I don't really see this with the Mandalorian, so again, I would say high in this facet. Now, with the facet of being altruistic, we see extreme examples here of both low and high. Again, murdering people on one side and saving Baby Yoda on the other side. So I'm just going to put him mid-range here for altruistic. In terms of compliance, this one's pretty interesting. He does seem to value cooperation. He knows that in some ways it's better to cooperate rather than compete. But then again, he doesn't really seem like the forgive and forget type either, right? So I think probably mid-range here for compliance. Now with modesty, I would actually say his modesty level is high. He does seem to be humble and not narcissistic. With tender-mindedness, it may seem a little odd considering his line of work, but I would say he has a high level on this facet. He does appear to have empathy, not just for Baby Yoda, but even for many others that he encounters. Now, moving to the last trait, we have neuroticism. And this is by far the easiest trait to plot his characteristics on. He's extremely low on all the facets, which again is very common for the warrior hero types. So we see low anxiety, angry hostility, depression, self-consciousness, impulsiveness, and vulnerability. Now, with the Mandalorian, it is a little tricky to figure out his personality profile in one way. He never takes off his helmet, right? So far, at least, we don't see his face. He only takes off his helmet when no one's around. And that includes the audience, right? We have that one scene where he takes it off, but we don't see his face. So without seeing facial expressions, especially during like conversations, it's much tougher to figure out some of the facets. And even with the helmet on, and I'm pretty confident it's going to stay on for a while in the series, if not for the entire series, I think we will get more information, again, to kind of tune in the personality profile, to get it a little bit more accurate. But either way, this is my best guess on his personality based on what I can observe from the series. So I know whenever I talk about the personality profiles of fictional characters, there will be different opinions, people who agree with me and disagree with me. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate really interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found this description of The Mandalorian to be interesting. Thanks for watching.